What would you do if you found a baby abandoned in the trash? This is the story of Ethan Carter, a 12-year-old boy who was just trying to survive, but suddenly became the sole protector of a baby girl with no one else to turn to, with no money, no resources, and no idea how he would manage. Ethan decided to do the impossible, care for her, love her, and give her a future. But the world wasn't kind, and soon the authorities came knocking, threatening to tear his family apart. Ethan faced a gut-wrenching decision fight to keep Lily or let her go for a better future. What would you choose if your world was on the brink of collapse? Ethan's journey will make you question everything about family sacrifice and what it truly means to love someone. Stay tuned for the incredible twists in this emotional roller coaster. In the heart of a dilapidated neighborhood nestled between crumbling buildings and forgotten alleyways lived Ethan Carter, a 12-year-old boy whose life had been marked by hardship and silence. Every day he woke up before the sun rose, his hands calloused and tired from years of collecting scraps, plastic bottles, cardboard old cans just to make enough money to survive. He lived with his grandmother, Grandma Rose, in a small house that seemed to hold together only by sheer willpower. The roof leaked, the walls creaked, and every winter the cold seeped through the gaps, leaving them shivering under threadbare blankets. But despite everything, there was one thing Ethan could always rely on: Grandma Rose's unwavering love. She had raised him after his parents died in a tragic accident when he was just a baby. Ethan didn't remember his parents, but Grandma Rose filled the empty spaces with stories of love and strength. Every morning she would sweep the small porch, humming an old lullaby, while Ethan prepared himself for another day of scavenging. Though their life was far from easy, they were a team, a tiny struggling family in a world that had forgotten them. That morning, like every other, Ethan ventured out into the streets, searching for anything that could be sold for a few cents. His heart was heavy with worry, knowing that they didn't even have enough to buy bread. But this morning would be different. As Ethan rummaged the pile of discarded trash behind an old rusted dumpster, a faint sound pierced the air. A soft cry, a sound so fragile it almost seemed like the wind itself was carrying it. Curious, he followed the sound, stepping cautiously over piles of rotting food and torn paper. There, hidden beneath a heap of old clothes, was a bundle, a tiny baby, no more than a few days old, wrapped in filthy rags. The baby's skin was pale. Her tiny fingers curled tightly as she whimpered softly. Ethan's heart raced and his hands shook as he knelt down beside the abandoned child. His mind screamed for him to leave it there, to walk away and forget what he had found. But his heart wouldn't let him. Not this time. Without a second thought, he gently scooped up the baby, cradling her against his chest. She was so small, so fragile. There was no way he could leave her in that cold, heartless place. The weight of the responsibility hit him hard, but there was no going back now. Ethan wasn't a father, wasn't a protector. He was just a boy who barely knew how to take care of himself. Yet, looking into the baby's tear-filled eyes, something shifted inside him. A surge of protectiveness, of love he never knew he had within him. With the baby wrapped securely in his arms, Ethan rushed back home, his pulse pounding in his ears. When he entered the tiny house, Grandma Rose was sitting by the window, as she always did, watching the world pass by. But when she saw Ethan standing in the doorway, cradling the baby, her eyes widened with shock. "Ethan," she gasped, standing up slowly. "Where did you find her? What is this?" "She was in the trash," Ethan said, breathless. "All alone," she was crying, "and I couldn't leave her there." "Grandma!" Grandma Rose's face softened as she stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for the baby. She looked at the little girl in her arms with tears in her eyes. "She's so tiny, so fragile. What are we going to do, Ethan?" Ethan looked at Grandma Rose, his mind racing. He didn't know what they were going to do. He didn't know how they would feed her, how they would care for her. They had nothing, no money, no resources. But in that moment, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to abandon her. Not like this. "We'll take care of her," Ethan said quietly, determination in his voice. "We have to." Over the next few days, Ethan and Grandma Rose did everything they could to care for Lily as they decided to name the baby. They used a little money they had left to buy some milk, and Grandma Rose made makeshift diapers from old cloth. It was hard, so much harder than anything Ethan had ever experienced. There were days when they didn't have enough food, and Ethan would go hungry just to make sure Lily had something to eat. But in the midst of their struggles, there was a new feeling, a sense of purpose. Each time Ethan saw Lily's eyes light up, her small hands gripping his fingers, he knew he was doing the right thing. She was their family now. And no matter how hard things got, he was going to protect her. He was going to make sure she had a future, even if it meant sacrificing everything he had. But it wasn't going to be easy. The world around them was cruel. And as the days passed, Ethan and Grandma Rose began to notice the judgmental looks from neighbors. Whispers followed them wherever they went. Some people were kind of offering old clothes or food, but others looked at Ethan with disdain. They saw him as a child incapable of providing for a baby. They saw him as a burden on the community, not someone worthy of helping. Ethan tried to ignore the whispers, but they stung. He wanted to scream to tell them that he wasn't a burden, that he was doing everything he could to give Lily a better life. But one thing was clear, they were on their own. Ethan had to figure out how to survive in a world that didn't care about people like him. And he was determined to make sure that Lily would never have to experience the same kind of cruelty and neglect that had been so common in his life. What would you have done in Ethan's shoes? Would you have taken responsibility for a baby in such difficult circumstances? As the days melted into weeks, Ethan Carter and Grandma Rose clung to each other, finding strength in their bond, even as they endured the crushing weight of poverty. Every morning, Ethan set out his steps heavy with the pressure of responsibility. His eyes searched the streets, hoping to find enough recyclable items to scrape together enough money to feed Lily and himself. Grandma Rose did what she could to stretch the meager resources they had, but Ethan knew it was never enough. Their life had become a constant balancing act, one where survival was a day-to-day struggle. But through it all, there was one unbreakable truth. Ethan would do anything for Lily. There was no room for hesitation, no space for doubt. She was family now, and he had promised her a future, a better one than the one he had known. Their pride, however, made them reluctant to ask for help. They lived too humbly, too privately to depend on others' charity. But their neighbors, some kind, some critical, saw their struggles. Some offered food, second-hand clothes, or even a word of encouragement. Ethan could feel the eyes on him, the whispers that followed him down the street. Some scorned him for taking on such a burden at such a young age. But there were others who saw him differently, applauding his courage. But no matter the judgment or the praise, Ethan stood firm. He would never let the world's opinion shake him. He had made a vow to Lily, and he intended to honor it, no matter the cost. One chilly afternoon, while walking to the local market, carrying Lily in his arms, Ethan noticed a woman watching him from the entrance of a store. Mrs. Johnson, the owner of the small local shop, was a well-dressed woman who always had an air of authority about her. But there was something in her gaze, a softness that caught Ethan off guard. She waited for a moment before crossing over to him. "Ethan," she said gently, her tone not quite accusatory, but not entirely sympathetic either. "I've been watching you. I know it's hard, but you're a young boy. How can you keep taking care of baby with nothing?" Ethan swallowed hard, feeling the familiar sting of judgment. Mrs. Johnson was one of the many who whispered behind his back. But now, standing face to face, it felt different. He wanted to defend himself, to tell her that she had no idea how hard he worked, how he had no choice but to keep going. Instead, he just tightened his grip on Lily, who had begun to squirm in his arms. "I'm doing the best I can," he said quietly, his voice tight with emotion. "She's my family. I won't abandon her." Mrs. Johnson seemed to study him for a moment, as though weighing her words carefully. Then her expression softened. "I know you are. That's why I'm here." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to Ethan. "This is for Lily. It's not much, but I hope it helps." Ethan froze for a moment, unable to believe what he was hearing. Mrs. Johnson had never been the type to give charity. And yet, here she was offering help. He took the envelope, cautiously, his heart racing. Inside, there was a small sum of cash, enough to buy a few bags of groceries to pay for some much-needed baby formula. "Thank you," he said softly, almost unsure what to say. "I don't know what to say." You don't have to say anything, Mrs. Johnson replied, her voice warm with sincerity. Just keep doing what you're doing, Ethan. You're doing the right thing. For a moment, Ethan just stood there stunned by the unexpected kindness. It wasn't much. It was enough to remind him that there were still people in the world who cared. The next morning, he used the money to buy milk for Lily and food for himself and Grandma Rose. It was the first time in weeks that he didn't feel the tight, gnawed hunger in his stomach. As Lily grew, so did the love and warmth that filled their little home. Her laughter, a sound so pure and joyful, became the music of their days. Ethan couldn't help but smile every time Lily took a new step. Her small, wobbly movements were like victories, each one a testament to their love and determination. But with the joy came the weight of the world. The neighbors' whispers didn't stop. Ethan tried to ignore them, but they gnawed at him. He wasn't just raising Lily. He was raising her in the eyes of a world that judged him unworthy. And that pressure was something he couldn't escape. One evening as Ethan and Grandma Rose were preparing dinner, there was a knock on the door. Ethan opened it to find 2 police officers standing on the other side. "Good evening, sir," one officer said, his tone formal, almost too polite. "We're here to check on the welfare of the child. We received some complaints." The world seemed to freeze around him. The officer's words hung in the air like a hammer about to fall. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he glanced at Grandma Rose, whose face had gone pale. "We've just been doing our best to care for her," Ethan said, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to remain calm. "She's my responsibility now." The officers exchanged a look before nodding. "We just need to make sure she's safe. Can we come in?" The room felt smaller, tighter as the officers stepped inside. They looked around, taking in the humble surroundings. Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness for Lily, who was sleeping soundly in the other room, unaware of the storm brewing around her. After a tense few minutes, the officers nodded, satisfied. "Everything seems in order," the second officer said. "Just make sure to get the proper assistance if you need it." As the officers left, Ethan closed the door behind them, his body shaking with the weight of what had just happened. This was a reality he faced every day. The constant threat of being torn away from Lily from a family he had built with his own 2 hands. But as the night fell and Lily slept peacefully in his arms, Ethan knew one thing. No matter what the world threw at him, he would never give up, not for Lily and certainly not for Grandma Rose. They were a family, and no one could take that away. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the interruption, but we hope you will help us improve our content in the future. How do you think Ethan should handle the pressure of being judged by others? What would you do in his situation? As the days turned into weeks, Ethan Carter began to feel the pressure of his battle intensifying. Every choice he made seemed to carry a weight far heavier than a young boy should have to bear. It wasn't just the everyday struggle to feed and care for Lily, but now the looming threat of losing her. The one thing in his life that made it all feel worthwhile hung over him like a storm cloud. One fateful morning, as the sun barely peeked over the horizon, a sharp knock echoed through their humble home. Ethan hesitated before answering a knot forming in his stomach. When he opened the door, 2 officials from social services stood there, their faces solemn and their expressions unreadable. Behind them, several curious neighbors watched with judgment in their eyes. "We've received reports about the living conditions here," one of the social workers said, their voice cold and professional. "We're here to check on Lily." Ethan's heart stopped. This was it, the nightmare he had been dreading. He swallowed hard and tried to steady himself, but fear twisted in his gut. I can explain," he stammered, feeling a surge of panic. "We've been doing our best. She's safe here. Lily is safe." The officials exchanged a look before stepping inside. The air was thick with tension. Ethan could feel his legs trembling beneath him as they inspected every corner of their small home. Grandma Rose sat quietly in the corner, her hands clenched in her lap, watching with a mixture of fear and concern. Ethan felt the walls closing in as the minutes dragged on, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he could keep it together. They moved from room to room, their gaze sharp and calculating. Ethan tried to explain, tried to show them how much he loved Lily, but his words seemed to fall flat in the face of their scrutiny. The living room was cluttered. The floor cracked and uneven. There was no running water, no luxuries, just survival. But it was more than just survival. It was love. It was family. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the social workers turned to him. "We have to take Lily into protective custody." One of them said, her voice almost apologetic but unyielding, "This environment is unsuitable for a child." Ethan felt the floor fall out from under him. His legs buckled, and for a moment he thought he might collapse. Lily, the little girl he had promised to protect, to give a future to, was going to be taken away from him. The thought was unbearable. "No," he said, his voice shaking but resolute. "You can't take her. She's mine. She's my family." The officials didn't respond immediately, but the tension in the room was palpable. The world outside seemed to freeze, and for that brief moment, Ethan felt like he was fighting for everything. For Lily, for the family they had built against all odds. And then, as if by some miracle, the door creaked open again. Mrs. Johnson, the woman who had helped him before, stepped into the room, her face etched with concern. She had been watching from a distance, perhaps knowing that something was about to break. She approached the social workers calmly but with undeniable authority. "Excuse me," Mrs. Johnson said, her voice clear and firm. "I'm Mrs. Johnson, and I've been following this family situation for some time now. I want to make an offer. I'd like to adopt." Lily Ethan blinked in surprise. He hadn't expected this. Mrs. Johnson, a wealthy woman well established, had never shown any signs of wanting to take such a responsibility. But in that moment, her words were a lifeline, a beacon of hope in an ocean of despair. "I can offer Lily a future." She continued, her eyes meeting Ethan's with an intensity that spoke volumes. "A stable home, proper education. She deserves a chance at something more than this, and I want to give it to her." Ethan felt his world shift. On one hand, he had Lily. She was his, and he had promised to care for her. On the other hand, he knew that the world wasn't kind to people like him. Lily deserved better. She deserved safety, security, a future he couldn't provide, not in the way Mrs. Johnson could. For a long moment, Ethan stood frozen, the weight of the decision crushing him. But then, as the silence stretched on, he looked at Lily, who was sleeping peacefully in the other room, oblivious to the storm swirling around her. He thought of her future, of her potential, and in that moment, he knew what he had to do. "I understand," Ethan said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "If this is the best thing for her, then I'll let her go." It was the hardest thing he had ever done, but it was the right thing. Lily would have a future, a bright, full future, and that's all Ethan had ever wanted for her. Years later, Lily flourished under Mrs. Johnson's care. She thrived in school, excelled in every subject, and became a strong, independent young woman. She would occasionally visit Ethan, and each time he was in awe of the person she was becoming. She had become everything he had hoped for, and more. Ethan, now an adult, had built a life for himself. He worked hard, but never forgot the sacrifices made by Grandma Rose, or the love that had brought him to this point. Every weekend, he made sure to visit Lily and catch up their bond unbreakable, even though their lives had taken very different paths. In those quiet moments, Ethan would watch Lily laugh and play, and he knew deep down that every hardship had been worth it, because in Lily, he had found a reason to keep going, the strength to survive, and the love that would carry him forward. What would you do in Ethan's position? Would you have made the same decision, or would you have fought harder to keep Lily with you? The story of Ethan and Lily teaches us profound lessons about sacrifice, love, and the true meaning of family. Ethan's journey is a reminder that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't about keeping those we love close, but about giving them the future they deserve, even if it means letting them go. His decision to put Lily's well-being before his own desires demonstrates the power of selflessness. It shows us that the bonds we create with others, even in the most difficult circumstances, are stronger than any material wealth. Moreover, the story underscores the importance of accepting help when it's offered and how kindness from others like Mrs. Johnson can change the course of someone's life. Ultimately, it's a story of hope that even in the toughest times, there's always a chance for a better tomorrow. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, Drop a 100 in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to share the video with your